Welcome, everyone, to the Country Club Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Leo McMahon. Today, we have with us the general manager of the Royal Palm Yacht and Country Club in Boca Raton, Florida, Rob Oosterhuis. Welcome, Rob.
Thanks, Leo. It's great to be here.
Great having you here. Thank you. I found Rob on LinkedIn, and I was a general manager in South Florida, and Rob is a general manager in South Florida. And my first question to Rob was, are you any relation to Peter Oosterhuis, who I remembered when I was a little boy watching him on TV, I think in the British Open. And Rob says,
that's probably right. Yep, that is my dad. Yeah, and he's lived sort of three different careers, three different lives. First as a golfer, and then as a golf professional, club professional. As I try to explain to all my friends, there's a big difference between professional golfer and golf professional. And then sort of the third phase of his professional life was getting into the media and broadcasting, and retired a few years ago. So he had a pretty good run in the golf world.
Now, did he almost win? Was it the British Open he almost won?
Yeah, he finished second in the British Open twice, and in 1973, at the Masters, he had a 3-shot lead going in the last round and couldn't quite close the deal. So I've got I'm actually getting it framed. I just found it on eBay, a great newspaper headline that says Oosterhuis in firm command. It was right after the third round of Augusta. And I thought, this is great because it's going to be perfect for a humility of just when you think you're on top of the mountain, you're at the base of the mountain. Doesn't always mean that today's success doesn't always translate into tomorrow.
Right. So coming from that golf background, how old were you when you first picked up a club, and where were you when you first picked up a club?
So if I remember correctly, and again, from the pictures that I've seen, I can remember holding a golf club when I was about 4 years old. And I grew up, born in England, lived in England and South Africa for my early years. But at that time, I think we also had a home in Palm Springs, Rancho Mirage, or Mission Hills, some people will know, where they played the Dinosaur, and then it turned into a few different names. And that was where we spent some time, and Pete Dye Golf Course, and that was some of my better memories growing up, was being down there.
So you started playing when you were 4. Did you have any success in junior golf?
Yeah, very, locally and regionally. I was a good high school golfer, and probably it's much different now. That's a whole other podcast, probably, is talking about junior golf. I have a daughter who's been playing golf for a couple of years now, here in South Florida, in which she's decided that she wants to do that. And when I grew up, it was, you had your events in your town, and then maybe there were some other things in Southern California, which again was a great junior golf market. But then, the other stuff was, it was tricky just to figure out. It sounds like we were dinosaurs, but there's no internet, so you're trying to do everything by word of mouth. You're trying to talk to people who knew what they were doing. So I had reasonable success as a junior. It got me into UCLA. I was able to, I say play there. I did play some tournaments, but I was there I got the free tutoring and the pre-enrollment in classes and the free golf equipment. But it's golf's a totally different thing now. And there's been also a huge influx of foreign golfers, coming over here, going to high schools and academies. And my daughter, when she decided she wanted to quit softball and soccer, and was all-star in those sports, she now goes to an academy, and she goes a few days a week. But there's kids who, again, I think Ledbetter and IMG sort of started this trend a few years ago, where they've got kids who are living there. They're coming from wherever they are, Europe and Asia, and South America seems to be a big feeder market now. And they're just living, and do a little school in the morning and a lot of golf in the afternoon. So, much different. Junior golf's changed a lot. It's I mean,
I guess so. Yeah.
There's so many parts, which is great, for you and I, coming from the, golf and club business. There's so many, I don't want to call them cottage industries, because they're not cottage anymore. There's so many industries that have popped up from that, whether it be golf instruction. Now there, obviously these golf academies, they didn't know that they were going to be, buying homes and buying apartment buildings and things like that. It's been great revenue stream. So, and I think, golf's, it's tough to explain to people who don't play golf. I mean, it's such a different game. I mean, I grew up playing golf and basketball, a little bit of baseball, but golf and basketball with my brother and I played. And, golf's just, it's such a good set of life lessons. I mean, you still get the team aspect when you play high school and college golf. But, it's, I'm really, gosh, I'm going to sound 1,000 years old now, but when I see praise for people who are playing golf and they say, "Oh, what a great guy, he called a penalty on himself," I think, well, he's not a bad guy, but that's just what you do. Like
Right.
that's just
Everybody's supposed to do that.
that's part of the game. I don't really understand. Or, when you have a question, you call them a question. Getting my daughter and some of her teenage friends who are playing to understand the concept of protecting the field. Like when you see something happen, you're supposed to ask a question. It doesn't make you a bad person or a tattletale or anything like that. That's part of the game.
So what's your daughter's handicap anyway?
She's about a 6.5. So yeah, it's good. She started, as I say, she was started here when she was 12 and she's 14 and a half now. So she's been playing about 2.5 years and got down pretty quickly. Really, the last year has been a rocket down. And now, as I used to tell students when I taught and people who were in the game, like that journey from 10 to 5 is 10 handicap to 5 handicap is a good journey, but going from 5 to scratch is like another planet. So, now
Right.
you can get some really good athletes who can knock it around and shoot in the high 70s, but when you start talking about breaking par, which she's had some good rounds where she's threatened it a little bit, it's a whole other deal. So it's fun to watch her. It's fun to watch her progress. It's tough. Again, golf's a tough sport because it's not something that you don't get better every single day. You have your regressions and you go to a different course, and some days you wake up feeling it, and some days you wake up and you don't have it. And
Right.
that's been quite an experience for her. That just because you shoot a couple under par for 9 holes the one day, that 45 you shoot the next day, that's there. That you gotta hone in on your mistakes and really attack your mistake. I mean, it's just like any sport that you coach or anything you do professionally. Like if you're not good at something, really go after it. We talk about that a lot at our club, and there's something we're not doing well. There's a couple of philosophies. You could say, well, I'm not going to do that anymore. But, in golf, you don't necessarily have the opportunity to say, I'm not going to hit pitch shots anymore or something like that.
Who's your daughter's golf coach?
So she goes to an academy in Boca Raton here on the other side of Boca. It's called the Don Law Golf Academy. Don, I think, had some good success a few years ago with some juniors and branched out, and he's got one up in the northern academy up in the northern part of the county. So she works with an instructor named Kenny Leach, PGA member. Kenny's been great. Kenny's one of the better players in the section too. So I always thought, like, about mentioning David Ledbetter, who I didn't think I would mention twice in 5 minutes, but one of David's things, when he was working, when he became a teacher, I think where it started was, he was a very good player. A lot of people don't know what a good player he was, playing, Sunshine Tour in Southern Africa back in the 70s and 80s. And I think he just had an eye and understanding of things. And so he was able to relate to players. And he started, that's back when you didn't have your entourages helping you with your golf game. You had, you were helping one another. And, but I think the point there, as it pertains to my daughter, is you have a good player who can relate to playing well and can relate to the challenges that a good player has.
Right. So you went through high school, you went through college. What was your first job in the hospitality industry?
First job was as a golf instructor. Well, I guess you could say while I was still in college, one of my college teammates, a guy named Kevin Rhodes, who is now the Harvard men's golf coach, and the director of instruction at the country club in Brookline. Even though he was a Northern California guy, I was Southern California, and we were at UCLA together. He said, "Hey, I got this job working at a camp up near Lake Tahoe this summer." He goes, "That's just a week. They need another instructor." And I was, like every college student, money hungry, cash strapped. And I said, "Well, give me the number. I'll call these guys." And, I called them, I got on the phone, and that turned from 1 week into 2 weeks. And I said, well, you guys don't have anything else? I said, well, no, but another guy we know is doing a couple other weeks. All of a sudden turned into a month's worth of work. And that's where I started getting into more of the instructional side. But really, it's funny. I was trying to reflect on it the other day, because I started in the business as a golf instructor, but really what working in those camps, and as I did it for sort of on to my third, I think I'd wound up doing it. I think that was my sophomore year I first did it. And then after my last year when I graduated, I did, I think we did about 8 weeks of camp at Pebble Beach, no less, which was pretty incredible. And I think what it taught me and I use today was just the kind of organizational and, how you had to organize things, how you had to execute things. You had to have a group of people. My job eventually as sort of the assistant director of the camp was, scheduling. I scheduled the airport pickup runs. I did all the rooming lists, and organized who was going to be riding on the buses with kids. And then I started sort of learned a little bit, I guess, about the art of delegation, where it was like I knew I could trust this counselor, so he was going to handle the tea times. This counselor was going to handle organizing what order the kids were going in lunch. And I can think of 8 people that I work with that I'm still very close with those camps. One of them being my brother, and a couple other guys who are still in the golf industry. Couple of guys one guy's a GM, actually here I think he's on the west coast of Florida now. And, it's just, it was really just a interesting small group of people. But, it's one of those things. I also think about coaching trees and, when you talk about football coaches and how they have all their coordinators and how people go on. And I think that's it taught me a really good lesson. It was about networking, just reaching out to people. And, when it came time to look for a job, I was reaching out to a lot of those people. And, I really wanted to learn more about golf instruction. And so I started visiting places around the country and, became a golf instructor, moved to Texas, moved to just outside of Dallas. And, did that for a couple of years and thought I was going to move back to Northern California, actually, to work at a golf facility for one of those instructors that I worked with at the golf camp. And another instructor I worked at another golf camp in Carmel said, hey, I'm over at Four Seasons Dallas. I really need somebody to come help me help me with instruction. And I think they need a golf professional to work in the golf shop. And so at the time I was just engaged to my now ex-wife. And, we were getting ready to move again, thinking we were going to move to California, but we're open to sort of any adventure. And then that adventure just took us from one side of Dallas to the other, and started working at Four Seasons at the TPC Las Colinas, where they played the Byron Nelson for years. And so, I was making $8.50 an hour or something like that in the golf shop, and then teaching whenever I could. And, really, as a 28-year-old, wasn't necessarily in love with it, being told what to do all the time, and Four Seasons had very strict standards. And, actually after about a year, you realize, wow, these standards are some of the most helpful things, that you can have. It becomes a bit by paint by numbers, where it's just, if you follow the playbook, you have success. And so I guess I did some good things at Four Seasons. I was working in the golf shop, and then 9 months later, they offered me the, outside service manager position. So I was assistant manager. I also oversaw the bag room, carts, driving range, set up for all our tournaments. We did about 60,000 rounds between 36 holes. We had, so I'm trying to remember how many members. We had golf members. We probably had 500-600 golf members, 3,000 total members between all the sports and social and everything that we had, in addition to the resort with about 350 rooms.
So I'm going to cut you. I'm going to cut you off right there, Rob.
Yeah.
So it's a good point to make, and people have to understand there's no rocket ship to the top in this industry, and you're explaining it right now. $8.50 an hour. You're giving some golf lessons, and you're 27 years old. That's kind of tough. You're in a tough spot. You kept going. You were persistent. And it paid off. And I didn't mean to cut you off, but anyway, keep going.
No, well, it sounds self-aggrandizing if I say it, so I appreciate you saying it. But I don't. I guess one of those things is that I would say, if somebody who is, I guess I was 26 as I'm thinking back, just try and do the right things all the time, and try and do things that advance you, or really more gain knowledge, I guess, more than anything. And um, I think what I at the time, even when I started working at Four Seasons, I thought I really wanted to be a golf instructor still, and I wanted to be a director of instruction somewhere. And in pretty short time, I realized that I liked more the business of golf. I remember when I went to the my first, it was PGA school. Again, not it wasn't called PGA school, even though we still called it that. But my level one, and we were sitting at a round table, and they're asking everybody, well, why did you get in? Why did you get into this line of work? And you go around, and it's, well, I love golf. I love golf. I love golf. I love playing golf. All these different, not really different things. It was pretty much the same flavor. And they came to me and they said, well, why did you get into this line of work? I said, I really love the business of golf. And I still mean it today. I know today I would say I love the club business, but what that meant to me is, you could say this about any industry, I suppose, but no 2 days are the same. Golf is a great, golf and clubs, as I discovered, probably a decade ago, it's just a great way to connect with people. And, this as well as I do, it's so cliche, but there's nothing quite like the way people connect with one another after a round of golf, during, before, during, after a round of golf. And, we talked about, honor and integrity and things like that. I mean, you play with somebody who cheats and doesn't know how, or as I like to, when my daughter and I talk about it, it's like, that person doesn't know how to count. They're not very good at math. And I need to make her a little less snarky, because she goes, oh, I don't think this person can count very well, Dad. And I said, yeah, I think you're right. But I loved being around the business of it, and then Four Seasons really taught me, I think I knew how to work hard. Like, that was, for one reason or another, my father, as a professional golfer, that you can count on one hand the number of people that golf comes easily to, in the world of golf. And, he sort of, I would tell people in recent years when they've asked about, how he figured it out. I mean, he had a teaching pro at his club in London where he grew up playing, but he worked, and I think he sort of subscribes the same church of thought that Trevino and Ben Hogan did. How Hogan used to talk about finding it in the dirt, and that, meant just didn't happen by accident, it happened by practice. And, the other really cool thing, and I probably gloss over this too much because it just became one of those things that, you saw happen, was at Four Seasons, and I'm looking over here right across my table right now on my desk, is we had the Byron Nelson Golf School, and was corporate golf school. You do about a dozen a year. They'd come in for about a 4-day, it was about a 4-day stay. And the highlight was that Byron would come and sit and have lunch with the group and tell stories. And so, conservatively, I got to spend, I don't know, 50, 60 hours of time, which doesn't sound like that much, but when, he's there for a couple hours of time, it's, maybe more, maybe probably more when we talk about some of the other corporate things, maybe closer to 100 hours, listening to Byron talk and, about the way he approached the game. And, it's
So
just,
what was one takeaway that you could say about Byron Nelson that helped you in life or your career?
um, it's a great question. And I don't know, I'm quite figured out how to translate this. Again, I do it more for golfers. I talk to my daughter, especially, and, when it comes to preparing for a round, is we've sort of got a routine where I've said, if you're playing a tournament, get there an hour and 20 minutes early. And really, probably you're fine with an hour, but like an hour and 20 minutes gives you a little bit of fudge time to figure out where you're going. And, and then now it's not just, when you and I were playing golf growing up, probably it's grab your bag, throw it over your shoulder. Now everybody's in pull carts, which I, like everybody else, made fun of everybody who had a pull cart, and now it's like, as someone who caddies for and watches it happen, like, I can't believe this wasn't around when I was 15, 16, 17. I mean, how I felt like I shrunk an inch and a half when I played golf, carrying a giant leather Jones bag over my shoulder. Um, and and she's got all the bells and whistles, and there's bottles of water, and now there's GPS range finders, and she's carrying her own snacks and backup snacks, and it's pretty easy. So, but anyway, the message with that is, I in my mind it was you had this regimen about how you warmed up, and that was one of the things that Byron used to say is when he got on his, I mean, whatever, you get 11 straight wins, that's one kind of streak. But when he was playing well, when he would go to a course, he said, all I wanted to do was just get a little bit loose at the golf course because I didn't want to start working on my swing. When I had it going, I didn't want to mess with it. And it's kind of an interesting message because, you always want to tell golfers you're always trying to get better. But his point was, you were building up to something. And once you got it, then you were just like, okay, what's the best way to maintain this? And I think there's some applications in the club world too, is, you're whether, food and beverage is a great one. You're trying to get a service style going. And once you get there, then it's like, okay, now it's maintaining, And then there comes certain times of the year. I mean, back when Byron played, like there were lulls in the calendar. So that's when you worked on your golf swing, when you went back to your club and, wherever you were working as your second job. I think some of it is just pick the right times to work on things. When things are going well, maintain and try and keep it going down the line. I think but it's also a fine line with, when I say that to my daughter is just because you shot, 73, 74, 75, 76 but now you've got a month before the next tournament. So what are you going to do in that interim? It's not about maintenance then, it's about improvement. So again, I think for, talking to Byron, it was trying to thread that needle of, okay, at what point is it maintenance? And then at what point is it progression? So again, I can't answer that for anybody, but you have to figure out where you are in your own personal life.
Right. So here's two things I heard so far. And you had the knowledge to understand how important it was. You said about the Four Seasons, they had strict standards.
Yeah.
And you were knowledgeable enough to pay attention to that.
Yeah, no, I can remember it still, and I remember being ignorant about it. And I can recall sitting in a meeting. It was the spring of 2001, and I remember our director of golf, Paul Ernest, who is now the general manager at the new development that the PGA's done in Frisco, with their new headquarters. And I remember him talking about the standards and our need to adhere to them. And we did a lot of testing based on the standards. And I don't know what it was, and it just hit me. I remember the discussion I had with Paul afterwards, and it just hit me like a lightning bolt, where I said, of all the things I have to do, focusing the staff on the standards and adhering to the standards is the most important thing I have to do, because, I really felt like my job was protecting and elevating the guest and member. And when we say guest, and we're talking about anybody who's coming up, like member, guest, hotel, whatever. My job was to elevate that guest experience. And, I think it was something that the hotel, it was very militaristic. This is the way you do this thing. Now, what I appreciate is the Four Seasons, it had all these, it might have 20 standards for, the golf experience, just in the, the arrival, the welcome, how the cart was staged, all these different things. And, but then there was almost like this caveat. It's like, it was almost like an asterisk at the bottom. It said, the only person who can deviate from these standards is the guest. So like if the standard was to have 2 bottles of water on the cart and the guest said, hey, I don't want any bottles of water, fine, they could take them off. It's funny because you'd see sometimes these junior staff say, well, I've got to have 2 bottles of water. And, and it's like, well, no, it's okay. And, you'd see it more in the restaurants where you had a standard. It was like, say every meal, 3-course meal should be able to be served in an hour. And, but then sometimes as the guest, they turn to somebody, the server, and say, hey, you know what? We're here to visit. Don't worry about us. Just check back every 15 or 20 minutes on us on drinks, and then we'll let you know when we're ready to order food. and so it was like now the guest was adjusting the standards. And it's kind of like in those job descriptions that you and I probably develop for staff, who would have a million things, and then at the bottom would say, and any reasonable request from your manager type of thing. I just that getting that standards base. I mean, I realized how easy it made it for the employee. And I used to say to people when and I rewrote some of our training manuals, and I remember working with some of our corporate trainers at Four Seasons about developing a corporate manual and a how-to, and really it could translate whether you were in Nevis in the West Indies or Costa Rica in Central America, Provence in the south of France, Exuma in the Bahamas, or you're in San Diego or you're in Dallas. It became sort of a just here's the manual. Now, just here's some blank spots that we left because we know this is going to change. Your property is going to be specific. And it just became, again, I think I used the term paint by numbers. Like as an employee, I just wanted to know if I do A through L, then usually this is the result's pretty good. I just knock these out. Now, again, is it not perfect? And I think it's never going to be perfect. And again, it's never perfect as soon as you insert people into the mix, right? As soon as a person comes over and, you've got all these standards for what things are going to look like. And then somebody comes in and they're late for their tea time. And then how do you figure that, so that becomes that you go from the science to the art.
Right.
I think there's a lot of art in what, you and I have done. I mean, I've got 500, we've got almost 550 memberships here, and I've got 550 different types of families, right, who are on that. So you have to be able to adjust those things. And I think that's where Four Seasons really started to take a good turn. Probably, I remember when I moved from Dallas to Costa Rica, opened the property there. And then I left and then rejoined in Santa Barbara. And there was this shift about experiences, and you were there to give guests experiences. Because I remember one of my experiences I had, it was the first date with my now wife that we had. We were in Houston, and we'd met up there, and we went, first real date, I guess I should say. And we went to the concierge at Four Seasons Houston, and I said, don't laugh that I'm asking for a sushi restaurant in Houston, but we said, what do you recommend? And he spoke to us, and at the end of it, he gave a recommendation. And the way he spoke, it was, I guarantee you, he got 100% on his standards, hitting all the bullets. But I was left feeling so empty. It was such a sterile interaction. It was almost, and I hate to say it this way because I think the guy was great. I remember he had his concierge keys on and everything, but it was soulless. It was without feeling. It was without empathy, and it was without connection. And I think then it was just interesting. Four Seasons talked about connecting with the guests, and and it was about adapting to the situations. And there's some great buzzwords that I still use today, but they would talk about getting to know the guests, getting to understand what they wanted. And then we talked about, experiences that were local and authentic. And, and it was really just about getting away from the canned experience. If I'm in the south of France, or I'm in New York, or I'm in South Florida, wherever I was at the Four Seasons, there should be something there that speaks to the place.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean you can't have a great Caesar salad at all those places, but what is it about South Florida? Well, we have some incredible fruits, and we have some of the freshest, most amazing fish in the world. If I'm in the south of France, what do I want to know about? Well, let's talk about wine. Let's talk about gastronomic experiences, that are special to those areas. What are the things that are grown in those areas? And I think that's what we really try and do here at our club. I mean, again, clubs can be a challenging place to be an innovator, because you've got this many members, and you're trying to make everybody happy, which you're never going to be able to do. And I always say, if I didn't make everybody happy, I know I made a mistake. So you got this many members, and every decision you make, you try to make this many people happy, and then try and figure out the people on the fringes. We talk about it with menu design. you've got on the fringe over here, you've got the guys who want the macrobiotic organic food, and they want to know the name of the farmer who picked the sprouts, and the talk to me about where the chicken lived before they were led to a humane death. And then you have these guys over here that say, if you could deep fry it, and then if you could also have some chocolate sauce on the side, that would be great. So you can't ignore those people, but you just,
Right.
if you make this many people happy, you sort of win the game. But, to win the game for these people, you have to be able to offer them some things. So
Right.
I think that, that's just, I drifted a little bit from the standards, but, I think you have your standards, and then you have, that's sort of again, the science of it. But then the art is, how do you hit the heart of people? How do you excite their minds? How do you engage them?
You
And
know
it's,
what?
yeah,
I
go
always
ahead.
looked at it. I always looked at it as the standards, like you were saying. If it's done like a robot and it's soulless, you're only going to go so far.
But you can
But
get
if
an
you
A
have,
minus with standards, A minus.
right,
But like again, here's back to the handicap going from 10 to 5 to 5 to scratch. You want to go from that A minus to the A is kind of like going from that 5 to scratch. It sounds like, well, we've already nailed the standards. We're like, okay, we'll now hire a staff of 200 people who all know how to smile. Doesn't matter if they're having a bad day, they're going to make the guest or the member have a good day. They're going to connect with those people. They're going to ask the right questions. They're going to be empathetic at the right time. They're going to know who to joke with, who to be serious with. That's how you go from A minus to A. And then, A to A plus is, now it gets into, trying to create those memorable experiences, and
right.
why are people joining clubs?
So I used to associate it with golf. I had a setup routine and a practice routine and a before round routine. And if I did it like a robot, I'm only going to go so far. But I looked at it as those routines allowed me to create, allowed me to be inventive on the golf course. If I stuck to that routine, now I'm free to create and have a good round of golf. If I stick to the standards in the dining room, I can take care of the guests now more easily.
Well, I mean, it's brilliant. My dad, when he had a really strong game in the early 70s, kind of to the latter part of the 70s, and then really hit a challenging time, 79, 80, early 81 when he was playing on tour. And he bumped into a friend of his, a guy named Bert Yancey, who some people will remember, who went on to play some Champions Tour. Um, and Bert said to him, I don't know if I think they were playing around somewhere, and Bert said to him, he goes, "You have no routine." And my dad said, "What are you talking about?" He said, he says, "You have no routine. You have no." He says, "You get up." He says, "One time you're taking 2 practice swings. Another time it's just you kind of like take a little brush of the turf, and another time you're throwing up grass. Another time you grab the club, and then you start talking about the shot." He said, "You got to have a routine." And yeah, my dad said, "Okay, well, And so my dad, he went through he eventually developed a routine and did it in pretty short order. And to your point, to me, it was more mental, right? It got you in the shot. And, but it was like you could get a routine. And Faldo talked about this years later. Like he would practice bunker shots out of like a perfect lie. And again, I'd heard him say this once. I don't know if he's changed his philosophy. Practice out of a perfect lie, and somebody would go, "Well, you don't get perfect lies." He said, "Well, yeah, no, I'm trying to get the same swing, and then when I know I can make the same swing, because then it's actually easier to become creative. When the lie's
Right,
a
right,
little
right,
varied, what's
right. Good
uphill,
point.
downhill, side hill." And it's funny. I try and talk to my daughter about it, and I think now it's one of those things where you have these little successes as a parent and golf instructor. I get to wear multiple hats with her. Is you talk about get a routine, get a routine. But yeah, when work, club work, golf, playing golf, it's very much you have this routine, you have your standards, but the second you hit your first shot or second you step on the first tee, it's like, okay, well, I've practiced hitting draws, on the range, and that's my go-to shot. Now here's a right to left dog leg, so I got to hit a little fade, or get up the lie, and it's not a perfect lie in the fairway, and there's a rough, there's a rough wind coming at me. It's a quartering, and how do I hit it? How do I hit the shot? So now everything becomes an adjustment. But I think back to golf and back to Byron Nelson, one of my instructors who I worked for at the Nike camps in Pebble Beach, and he was a U.S. junior winner, I think back in 1981 or two, I can't remember. Rich Merrick, and still a dear friend. And one of the last times, the last rounds of golf I played in California before I moved to Florida, we were playing, and I'd been playing a little bit. It was during COVID, and so I was actually playing a lot more with members, and it was the one thing you could do in California was play golf during COVID. And he was talking to me about my routine, my warm-up routine on the range. And, I said, well, I'm just trying to hit a draw. I'm trying to hit a draw. He said, well, yeah, but can you hit a fade? He goes, what about when you have to hit a fade? And he was talking about Nicholas. Nicholas would be on the range, when he was warming up, and he would try and hit, a few high shots, a few low shots, draws, fades, trying to just get a feel. So he get a feel when he would take out the course, but also Nicholas at the time, and this maybe more pertains to golf, he knew what worked. And there were a couple of times where he went out and said, I can't feel a fade today, or I can't feel a draw. So I'm not going to try and hit it. I'm not going to force a draw and, do a double cross and, hit a block push or something like that. And so anyway, just kind of an interesting way to, again, think about warming up and think about life a little bit. How you're going about it. But it's still like I think about it on the range now when I'm warming up, and I don't get to play as much golf as I'd like. Like all of us in the golf industry never play as much golf as you'd like. But
Right.
what is it that I'm trying to do today, and what feels good? It's like, oh no, okay, today's going to be a bigger draw, or today I can feel like I can hit this cut and really control it.
So we'll break away for a second because you grew up in a golf background, a golf start. How much golf do you play a month right now?
Well, so I'm lucky enough that I live in a golf community as well as working in a golf community. And unfortunately, this past summer, both those golf courses were shut down for renovation. So I played minimally this past summer. We had a couple parent-child tournaments, so that's where I really was grinding for my daughter and I to play. And she's you want to talk about pressure? Like I did some U.S. amateur qualifying, some U.S. junior stuff, and playing college. No pressure. We played again a few weeks ago, and I'm on the range, and I realize my hands are shaking, and it's just because I'm over there looking at her ripping these little draws. She's a left-handed golfer. She's ripping these draws down there, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I've just got to contribute a few shots to this effort. Like I can't go home where she's gonna say the whole round was on her ball. Yeah, it's terrifying. So, we're getting ready to open our golf course, Jack Nicklaus signature design, getting ready to reopen, probably about, let's see, ideally we're doing a ribbon cutting a month from today. We're going to actually, as soon as I get off this Zoom with you, we're going to be going to discuss it and try and make plans towards that. And then the course where I live, Norman Design, is their renovation. They'll reopen probably here in the next 2.5, 3 weeks. So then at that point I'll try and play on one of my days off. I'll try and play. When we get some longer hours in the spring and summer, then the beauty of living in a golf community is, we were talking about it is, we'll have dinner and then all of a sudden we'll look at each other and go, let's go play 3 holes. We just run out and sneak out. But I just also we try and do as much putting as we can. I'm a big believer that you can make up for a lot of sins by being a good putter. Course where I grew up, Montecito Country Club in Santa Barbara. My mom used to drop me off at about noon, and I'd go putt for an hour, and then I'd have lunch, and then I'd go putt. My friends and I would putt for another hour and a half, and then we'd probably not tee off till 3 o'clock. And then we played 9 holes, but we played 9 holes and it would take us like 2.5 hours because we'd hit so many different shots and chips, and we'd have little games that we'd play, and we'd come in and get back in about 5:30, 6 o'clock, and we'd putt then for another hour and a half. And so there's no substitute for just getting out there and getting feel, for being a putter.
What was the lowest handicap you ever wore in your life?
I got down to a scratch, but there might have been a touch of vanity in that. I did have my share of underpar rounds when I was playing. We spent most of my high school summers through my junior year, I guess, or I guess up to after my junior through my junior year, we'd spend our summers. My dad, when he stopped playing, he was working at a club in New Jersey, and so we would finish school week of Father's Day weekend. I mean, literally the day after school got out, we were on a plane in New Jersey. We did that for 4 summers, and then when Dad's golf season would finish just before Thanksgiving, then he'd fly back out to California. So we kind of had an unconventional. We had big blocks of time together, from Father's Day to Labor Day together, and then Thanksgiving till probably early March together. So we it was kind of a little different approach to golf, but that's kind of how that's how we did it.
So leading up to today, what's your handicap today?
So when I play with member, I mean, I'm again golf professional by trade. On theory, I'm supposed to say scratch, but I'm not going to get any money games of a scratch. I'll say I'm a 6, and
Okay, yeah, that's exactly.
I've so warmed up to the fact that I can start moving up tee boxes a little bit, and I'm lucky enough to be on staff with Callaway, and I just tried out one of their new drivers the other day, and we were testing against my old driver, and I said, this is actually showing that I'm hitting it 15 yards further. I need to be doing what I tell everybody, that you can buy a better game. So I can still, my short game's still pretty good. And if I can drive it straight off the tee, probably like the rest of the golf world, I'm a threat to shoot a decent number. I don't have much of a temper. I guess that's the English side of me. But I do have a little bit of fire in me. So get excited when things get going well. I guess that's the South African side in me too.
So a little bit of a curveball here. Can you tell me a Shawn Humphries story and give our listeners a background on Shawn?
Yeah. So Leo and I, when Leo called me and we started talking about your background, and you were telling me you were up in Atlantis, and I said, well, where were you? And you said, oh, Lost City, and I got that right? I'm not right.
Right,
I'm
you
not
got it
wrong.
right.
So, and I said, hey, so you don't happen to know a guy named Shawn Humphries? And you said, yeah, no, I know Shawn. And unfortunately, Shawn passed away about a year ago from cancer. And so Shawn was, well, yeah, it's funny because we glossed over when I said my instructor, the guy who hired me at Four Seasons Dallas, was Shawn Humphries. And so Shawn's a good old boy from Oklahoma, and was a good golfer. And I think he started at Oklahoma at OU, and then wound up, I think, graduated from Oklahoma City University. And Shawn was the master at there's so many things. I mean, to this day, networking and trying to learn. I mean, I'll just pick those two things. There's a half a dozen other things I could talk about with Shawn, but he was the guy who taught me about sending thank you notes to people and personalizing things to the clients, and how we organized the camps that we taught and the programs that we did. And I can remember sleeping on, again, this is 21, 22 years old, and Shawn, I think he was 10 years older than me, maybe wasn't quite that much older. Sleeping on the sofa at Shawn's place in Carmel, or sorry, Monterey, when he was working in Carmel, and watching these old bootleg pirated tapes of Ben Hogan hitting balls, or all these instructors Jim Hardy and Hank Haney and all these guys talking about the golf swing, and then us talking about it. And then I remember, and him and Rich Merrick, who I mentioned, and Josh Zander, who's another top 100 teacher who teaches in San Francisco, sitting around with those guys, just talking about golf swing. And they're, Rich and Josh were a little bit older than me, but I always like to put up a good argument about whatever it was, even when I was wrong. Something I still do to this day. I think that was one of those things that, although I thought I was right, or thought I could talk myself into being right, I still like to play devil's advocate.
Right.
But but Shawn was awesome. I mean, gosh, I mean, there's probably so many good stories. I'm trying to think what I can tell on air.
I
But
remember he had a real high motor, man. He was fast, and he
well, that
loved to
so
talk about golf.
that's another. I mean, that's another one. It's funny. I thought about Shawn at Thanksgiving a few weeks ago, and not just because it's that time of year that you think about giving thanks to people who've influenced your life, but um, sitting over there talking, sort of our pre Thanksgiving dinner, our pre shift lineup, and everybody's going over the details of who's assigned to what, and we have such a good food and beverage team, and we hire a lot of, as a lot of clubs do in South Florida, we hire a lot of international staff for our peak season, from essentially from Halloween through Mother's Day. And so the fun part of that is, for me, we hire a lot of South Africans. So I have, as someone who considers himself South African, it's like I have all these little brothers and sisters who are here, and get to talk about home and everything. And but when we're sitting there talking to them, and I make my old, as my kids would say, my dad jokes, and I say, thanks so much for you all being here. Thanksgiving is, it's such a special day. Thanksgiving, I said, or as you all call it back home, Thursday, which doesn't mean anything in the rest of the world. Um, I said to them, one of the messages I, talked about what Thanksgiving means to a lot of families. And it's a lot, for our members, it's the way a lot of people are, it's the one time a year they're with all their family and things like that. But the other message I gave to them, I said, I asked some guys, I said, what's that experience going to be for that first person that walks through the door? And they all said, it's going to be great. And the food's going to look great. And the room's going to be wonderful. And we're going to get drinks to them quickly. And, the music's going to be perfect, blah, blah, blah. And I said, what about that guy that sits down at 5:30 in that last seating? And it's
Very
like,
good.
quiet.
Very good.
And, and that was a Shawn thing. Like, when you're teaching a corporate school and you got 12 guys lined up, or you have people come in waves, and it's like, okay, I'm doing, maybe I'm doing short game, and another guy's, I'm doing chipping and pitching, another guy's doing putting, and Shawn's doing full swing, and they're rotating, and you're doing 3 hours of that. That last guy that Shawn gets to with full swing had to have the same positive experience as that
Right.
first guy that he got when he was fresh out of the box.
Great point.
And it's, it's it's tough. I mean, again, and then it's also like you get those little challenges, because I can remember watching Shawn work with people during camps, like, this guy, and whatever I was saying at the time as a 21-year-old, like, this guy sucks, Shawn. Like, why are we bothering? And Shawn would be like, no, I can help him. I can help him. And, it was like, there's a great line in the movie Almost Famous. Jason Lee, he's the lead singer of the band, and he's talking to this kid who's interviewing and traveling with the band. And I'll try and summarize it. Basically, he says, I'm singing to everybody, everybody's having a good time. He goes, but I find that one guy in the audience who can't get off, and I get him off. And that's kind of the way Shawn is, I was going to help everybody, but like, give me that guy who looks like he's terrible, and I'm going to figure out a way to make him have a good time. I mean, you get these corporate golf schools. I mean, imagine, I taught with Shawn again from when I was 21. We worked together even until I was 30. When he left Four Seasons, he was doing some corporate programs, and he let me tag along. We did some programs I think we were in Sun River, Oregon. We were at Kiowa. I'm forgetting somewhere else, but some great spots. And again, he would, sometimes these corporate programs, those programs, fortunately, they were bringing real golfers. But in Dallas, you might get somebody to say, yeah, I play golf once a year. I'm like, oh my God, like, this guy's got 3 days of golf. What's going to happen? And so, and Shawn was so good, like, he'd figure out that program for that person. But again, like, I apply those lessons today. You get that table of people that come in, 8 top, and 78 are fine with, like, they want their Tito's and soda, they're going to have their steaks and their salmon. But then you got that 8th person who's like, they want that, what is that craft cocktail that you can bring them? How can you excite them with what's in the glass? They don't eat red meat, they only eat fish, and what are you putting on the plate, and what can you tell them? How are you going to excite them? So it's great lessons. I mean, it's a challenge. I probably drive myself nuts just as a consumer, when I go out, and look, my kids are happy in them, but I'm trying to train them, to say, like, go looking for those experiences. Like, you can go to the Chick-fil-A's and the Chili's and I mean, again, let's go keep going up, and you wind up at a, Morton's or a Ruth's Chris, and, all those places, like back to four standards, they all have their set of standards, and they all do what they do, and they do it very well, and understand the brand that you're walking into. But like, I love going to, the not chain places because you get the different experiences, and I'm trying to eat foods from all over the world. I lived in, Costa Rica for 3 years, and I love traveling is my vice. And so I go looking for those experiences. And so I think that's where we really try. We have a lot of fun at work on the food and beverage side in trying to bring those experiences to, to the members and their guests. So that's a lot of Shawn. He was dear to me. He was like, I was the oldest of two brothers. Shawn was like a big brother. I could call him whenever and bounce ideas off. I mean, the most positive person I've ever met, and I think that's something, when you talk about being aspirational, and you talk about, how do you impact people? Like, I want people to walk away from me going, that guy's positive. That guy impacted me. And
right.
It's very aspirational. I remember my brother, this is, I guess, 2.5 years ago. This is, yeah, so maybe 3 years, just after we moved to Florida. My brother's girlfriend, now wife, her mother got diagnosed with some pretty bad cancer, and it was like the low percentages and the treatments. And I remember talking to Shawn, and Shawn said, classic Shawn, don't listen to doctors. He's like, don't listen to doctors. He goes, you can get it with exercise, you can get it with diet. He goes, but more than anything, you're going to get it with positive thinking. Keep looking for a doctor till you find somebody who gives you that, that answer of hope. And, like, I don't know if he was right or wrong. We shared some of those messages with her, and, and then sure enough, she found somebody who did give her a little bit more of a positive outlook. And, 3 years later, it's basically undetectable. And, Shawn went through multiple bouts of cancer, and, I mean, again, finally it got to him, but, the most positive person, and did it in like a way that appreciates to my, English, sarcastic, dry sense of wit. Like, we could make fun of ourselves and make fun of other people in a not too harmful way. And, I miss him a lot. It's funny, like, because now, we're coming up next month. I'll be going to the PGA show, and I know I'll run into people who know Shawn and knew Shawn, and, we'll get to reminisce for a little bit about things. And
nice man.
Just a good guy.
I remember the first time I met him, I was with the director of golf, Todd LaCrone from Atlantis Country Club, and we're talking the golf swing with Shawn. And Shawn was going to go out to dinner with me that night, a couple hours later. And he says, okay, I'll see you guys later. And he hops in his car and he drives away. And I turned to Todd. I said, man, I thought you were a golf nut. This guy's on another planet. He loved talking the golf swing.
It was really great. I remember, growing up in Santa Barbara, which doesn't seem like it's that interesting of a sports place. There were a lot of connections to the Lakers at the time. A guy named Bill Burtka was one of the assistant coaches for Pat Riley for years and years and years. And the Lakers used to come up. There was a small NAIA Christian college called Westmont College in Montecito, the section of Santa Barbara where I grew up. And so we'd go up to games when I was in, third, fourth grade, and go to the basketball camps. And, it was just, but every now and then you hear these stories of some of our high school coaches got to hang out with some of these guys on the periphery of the Lakers. And, when you get people talking, people interested in that, and you get people talk. It's amazing the things that come out, and I can remember these guys telling me a story about Pat Riley going to Bill Burtka, feeling really proud of himself, saying, hey, I think I found this new play that I want to run. And, this is probably in the mid 80s, and they're probably won like 3 championships by that time. And Burtka goes to some giant 3-ring binder and pulls it out and says, yeah, here's the play. We came up with this in 1952, and here's Pat Riley, the best coach in the league. And it's just fun to, it's great. I heard stories. One of my teachers in high school went to high school in up in San Mateo area, and it was like this whole hotbed of like where Dick Vermeil and John Robinson and John Madden were all there, and it's just kind of amazing when you get this nucleus of people who want to talk about things. And
Yeah,
even
yeah.
though most of the world hasn't heard of Shawn, but a lot of the golf world has, it's like it's amazing. You get him and some other, like you said, some other guys into golf, and all of a
Right.
sudden it's just like the knowledge and the energy really goes. So
And Sean loved to talk about it too. It
yeah,
was
gosh, man,
interesting.
it was so much fun. Like I remember like I still couldn't keep up with Shawn. I remember being the last program I did with him. Again, this is 20 years ago now. The last program I did with him was in Oregon. We did together, and Arizona. That was the other place we went. But last program we did was in Oregon. I remember one of the instructors who was with me and was still a good friend, and I mean, we could barely stay upright. We were so tired, because it's get up at 6 in the morning, make sure all the bags have got over to the golf course, make sure everything's set up, run in, say hello to it, make sure everybody's getting breakfast, then go, teach, run and get all your pairings together, get everybody teed off, play with everybody. Oh, then you got to go back and get all the amenities ready that you're going to send to the rooms, meet everybody for dinner. Oh, you got to have a couple drinks too to keep everybody entertained. And then it's like, then you got to stay up and plan for the night. And I'm like, I can't do this, Shawn. And Shawn, I mean, it just, yeah, the energy, but it was kind of infectious. Like, I just,
Right.
and my wife and I have kind of adopted a bit of the mentality more in terms of like the excitement of life than anything else. But,
Right. Right.
I'll sleep when I'm dead. Right.
Right. So you're at the Royal Palm Yacht and Country Club. Tell us a little bit about the yacht side of the Royal Palm Yacht and Country Club.
Well, I'm looking out my window and I can see the tops of about 12 of the yachts. We've got about 60 slips in our marina, which to me didn't sound like the biggest marina. I mean, as far as big corporate marinas, it's not. But when it comes to the club space, we are one of the bigger marinas. We've got a range of boats. And I remember worrying about during my interview, like, oh my gosh, I couldn't even tell you one end of the boat from the other. And I'm calling all my friends who've run yacht clubs. And fortunately, two of my closest friends in the club industry had both taken a bit of a detour to yacht clubs I was the one who told them, both of them, like, hey, there's a GM job. It's at a yacht club. Go get it so you can get GM on your resume. I mean, this kind of goes to career advancement. You got to be a number one at some point. So go to a yacht club, and both of them did. And I think they both learn. You learn tremendous generic skills even when it's yachts, right? And then a yachting group is they're just as nutty as a golf group, as a tennis group, as a cards, bridge, and mahjong group. So I quickly learned in my interview that I wasn't gonna have to be out there tying up boats and doing anything, and doing guiding boats into a slip or anything like that. Uh, we're not necessarily on the boating side. We're not necessarily the most active boating side, although we're adding more and more activities. But that's sort of just part of what we do. We're for a fairly small footprint of a facility. And Leo, some of the small cities down here that call themselves clubs. We're 18 holes. We've got 6 tennis courts. We've got 2 of those we have our hard courts with lines for pickleball. So we've got some flexibility, multi-use there. We've got a swimming pool. We have bocce and croquet. Of course, the golf course and the driving range. And then we have 2 clubhouses. So we have 2 clubhouses. We have a fitness center separately, golf maintenance facility. So we've managed to pack a lot into a small area, and it's also one of those things that makes the job interesting, where you've got to make sure you're, in my role and your role that you formerly had, you got to make sure you're moving around and touching all the different areas, because what I found in resorts, especially, and what I've seen here is and I still say it to this day, the further you get away from the GM's office, the less attention you tend to get, for better or worse, and so if you have a leader in an area that's really far away, that's doing great, and they're a strong leader, great, they don't need me. But sometimes if you have someone who's less than the strongest leader, it tends to become its own little culture, and sometimes it can be tough to get out of that routine as well. and but also you want to make sure those employees, well, and members too, but those that group of employees feels engaged and that they don't feel
Right,
second
right,
class. And
right,
like a lot of facilities, our golf maintenance, they have their own cafeteria, and that's fine. But it goes back to how what's their experience as an employee. Like we've got to make sure that their food is just as good as the food that the employees who are inside the main clubhouse
right,
with dining, that
right,
they're getting that experience. And if
right,
you can't make it as broad and deep, you've got to make sure you got to have the makeup. So they have to have the special days, and you have to have some days where it's like, guess what? Today you guys get steak and shrimp. The rest of the place doesn't. So, we were pretty active membership. We're, as I'm sure you picked up in your last few years in South Florida, that it's not like the old, joke of the Seinfeld days where it's like, everybody shows up at Thanksgiving and then leaves after Easter. We it's very
right.
scientific. We think about 70% of our membership is here year round.
Wow,
They still
wow.
travel a lot in the summer, that's 70%, but it's again non-scientific, but that's what we're seeing.
Right, right,
And I think it's a mix of things. I think more and more, like, I don't understand. Again, as somebody who spent 4 summers in New Jersey, I don't really understand going to New Jersey for cooler weather in the summer. Like, as far as I'm concerned, New Jersey was the hottest and most humid place I'd ever been. Now, again, that was a kid from a coastal town
right,
in Southern California, so that was my context. And we did have a pretty humid summer here last summer, but I think there's that side of it. I think more and more people. I mean, there's some cultural stuff, and certain people don't want to be, they don't like the way the politics are in their town, and Florida seems to jive with more what how they want to live. And Florida was a haven for a lot of people during COVID, so I think there's some
right.
good
Some
good
hangover from
memories
that.
there. I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, California was, you didn't know what good morning, here's your new rules of the day during COVID. And again, I
Right,
don't envy, I'm not saying anybody made the right or wrong choices. I don't envy any government official who was having to make choices there, but just, I think from the lifestyle for a lot of people, in Florida, especially being an outdoor place, it worked. And so, and also we're seeing more families, and that's not just our club, we're seeing more families that are joining clubs. So, they are here. I mean, yes, you travel for a few weeks in the summer here and there, but, for the most part, too, with kids, playing sports, that are year round, it's tough to just say, I'm going to go to somewhere else for 2 months.
right. So if you were going to pass on some advice to a 21-year-old just starting out in the club
Sure.
industry, what would you say to them?
Um, it's probably 3 or 4 things, and when I say 3 or 4, I'll probably wind up with 10. But I think number one, just always be willing to get out of your comfort zone. I mean, we talked about my kids, in their lives, my children, but we talk about here, like, don't be comfortable, don't be complacent. But also that means a lot of things. That means when somebody says, "Hey, I need volunteers," like, don't wait around to find out what it's for. Just put your hand up. Volunteer, be part of whatever programs there are going on at the club. Go volunteer to work in another area. For me, it was, and again, I was lucky because I grew up, international parents. They took a risk. They moved to Santa Barbara, which doesn't sound like such a risk when you say it out loud, but they moved from London to Santa Barbara, for my dad to embark on a new career. And so we just, and then my dad, when he stopped playing, it's like, okay, I'm going to work in New Jersey, and then I'll come, we'll do this whole thing. So, but for me, it came first of, all right, I'm going to go move to Texas for this job, and I'm going to figure it out when I get there. And then while I was in Texas, after being there for almost 6 years, I get called to the general manager's office. He said, "What do you think about Costa Rica?" And I said, "Well, not a whole lot, and he said, "Well, they're opening the project and we need a director of golf down there." And so, I put my hand up and said, "Let's go." And then I think, then I was in, then when I left there, I went back to Southern California, and I was back into golf and hotel management stuff for, from 2006 to 2016, and not really being sure what I wanted to do. And then finding that path, of, okay, I've got a fork. I can stay at the club where I am and we're going to renovate and it'll probably be great, but I'm not really sure how it's going to end up. Or I can try and go down the hotel path and, I know I kind of know what's there, or I can go to the member owned private club, which is what appealed to me. And ultimately I decided to do. But, the message there is like, you still had to take these, I'll call it calculated, these chances, these risks, these leaps. But, when you're younger, I say it to people all the time. I say it to people who work for us here and people who I love and I don't want to leave. But, I also encourage them, if there's something, you think there's something that might be better out there for you, let's talk about it. I'm not going to hold a grudge. I think asking for help, vulnerability has become a trait that I think has been a lot more appealing in leaders in the last few years. I try and share
Good
more
point.
about my personal life and my personal journeys. Don't, before it'd be like, oh God, don't tell anybody that you're upset about something, or don't talk about a failure.
Right.
I've got written up on my board, a couple things, let's fail together. We don't really fail. We either learn or succeed.
Very good.
But we're doing it together. And, some clubs can have those, look, we're not no different. We sometimes have those clubs. Sometimes those moments, the club where a member will say, well, who was responsible for this? And, you don't know whether they loved it or hated it, because they either want to give credit or blame. And, I think that's one of those things where, another piece of advice I give to people is be quick to accept blame and to deflect credit, and say, when people say you've done a great job, I will say, and I mean that, it has to be sincere, and I mean this, as we have a great team. A lot of people,
Right.
a lot of people put time into
Right.
this, and you want to celebrate. I'm a big celebrate everything guy. But I think the last message, I think probably everybody's listened this far, and if they listen to the whole thing, is that, back to the Shawn Humphries stuff, is connect with people, network. The worst thing that somebody can do is go to a PGA Expo, or go to a CMA World Conference, or go to your local, your state, or your chapter CMA conference, or your PGA, annual PGA meeting, and not meet some new people. I still carry around business cards, but I've also got I can send you a text and here's my contact, or I can scan your QR code and now you got my contact. And I think just making those connections is so important. And, it's not about using people. It's about being there and being willing to give too. And there was a club consultant, Michael Crandall, and he talked to a group of us. He's so funny. He talked to a group of us, and he said, he spoke to us for like a whole day. And then he said, here's a few takeaways. And he gave us a few things. And one of his takeaways that I talk about probably at least once a month, probably closer to once a week, is if you can help somebody, if it takes you 15 minutes or less and you can help somebody, do it. And then he was saying more of the context, if somebody in the industry reaches out to you and says, hey, Rob, can I talk to you about ... or I'm really struggling with XYZ. I think just being willing to give back is so important. When you reached out to me, we obviously had a lot of connections with different people, but like, I view this as, you and I could talk, we could learn from each other. You and I have so many connections to one another. A month and a half ago, we didn't know each other. Right. And now
Right.
so many connections. And I just look at it as trying to put people together. I have a running joke. I won't even say who the vendor is, because they're so good. And I just have never it's never aligned where we've been able to use them in the club, but I've introduced them to so many other people who they now do business with, that they're taking me to dinner at the PGA show. And they say, one of these years we're going to take you as our client. And I said, yeah, no, I know. And, but again, I believe, meet as many people as you can, keep those good people keep the good people in your life. We can all get pessimistic, and, my world, or my personal life my persona is, I get more pessimistic about myself and my performance. And so I have to kind of pull myself out of that every now and then. But I think surround yourself with positive people. Shawn was one of those people for me. I've got a dozen other people who I can call and I can just share a little bit of the issue, and all of a sudden it's like they reframe it for me. So
Right, right, right.
just, I mean, and I do it like I'm lucky. My wife, she was in the hospitality industry for 20 years. Um, and, so she's got some great context. And, a lot of times, I mean, now I'm to the point with her where I'll be telling her about something. I'll just look at her. I'm like, yeah, I already know what you're going to say. So never mind. I've got my answer type of thing, and, and so I think just, for the young people, just again, make your tribe as big as you can, you know, connect with people, touch base with them as much as you can. Don't be afraid of the new thing. I've got some young kids, right? My youngest son is 12 and got a 14 and a 16-year-old, and then I've got a 21-year-old. And, it's funny. They all have different personalities, and some of them are really, they can work into a crowd of people and work well. And some of them are a little quiet, a little more shy. And, you try and talk about worst case scenarios, and some of our minds go to, oh my gosh, what if I talk to this person, they think I'm an idiot, but then you've got to accept that the corollary is also true. What if I talk to this person and they think I'm fantastic and I think they're fantastic, and all of a sudden, we have these things.
Bingo, right.
I mean, I've got so many stories about stupid little things where I just started talking to somebody, for no reason at all. And
Right.
we wind up connecting. And again, golf and the club world is so small. And I think it's just full of such a group. I mean, we don't get into the golf business. We don't get into the club business. It is nice. We can make a nice living, but we don't get into it because, we're going to get our, on the cover of a magazine, or not getting our face etched on a mountain or anything like that. We get into it because we want to give back to people, because we want to give, again, so many cliches. And I always say it, cliches are cliches for a reason. We have if you really have a servant's heart and you want to give back, you can't fake that. Like you can fake it for a little while, but eventually you get sniffed out by people.
And that's what it's all about, to be honest with you. You got to help people.
No, well, I mean, this is fantastic. I mean, what you're doing, this is special stuff you're doing. Hopefully we tell, maybe people listen to this, they laugh a couple times, they write a couple notes. It was like, I always remember talking to Shawn and talking about working with tour pros. And he said, you might work with a tour pro and you're talking about 10, 12 things with them. And he goes, but at the end of the day, he goes, they're going to take one or two things away. They're going to take one or two things away from that lesson. And it's the same thing. Like, you take one or two things away from a conference, from a meeting, it's a win. Just take a few things away. And, and sometimes what your takeaway can be is, what, I just watched how they did that and I'm never going to do it that way. And that's a takeaway, learn how not to do something. There's the last lesson. Take something away from everything, even if it's how not to do it.
Right, right. So I know a couple of young people that are struggling. They're early 20s, mid 20s. And I'm going to have them reach out to you if they're willing, and if you're willing, and maybe you can help them out a little bit.
No, well, as I say, like, I'm not about giving handouts, but I will put a hand out, if you will. I should probably trademark that. I feel pretty proud of myself about that one. But no, but I will say, I'll do these. We did a lot in Southern California PGA. I was on the board when I was there, and we had a really great educational program. We did a great webinar program. Robin Shelton, who's was a past president down there and is now general manager at Newport Beach Country Club. And he really had a lot of energy for enhancing the educational programs. And it was nice enough to let me, work with him. And at the end of my webinars, I would at the end, I would put up my personal email. Here's my work email. Here's my personal email. Here's my cell phone.
Very good.
I'd immediately get a bunch of people who would email me, say, hey, I want to reach out to you, blah, blah, blah. I'd say, great, here's a cell phone. You let me know, text me, email me. And it was minimal. It was minimal how many people would follow through with it. And I encourage people, but people did follow through. And there are people, again, I can promise you there's people, and I can think of 3 of them right now, who they reached out, they connected, we talked. Sometimes the stuff I have to say isn't what they want to hear, but what, and I have one of my closest friends around here, and I won't, he's recognized, and he was going through a spot, and I said, he reached out to me, and I said, hey, like, I'm going to give you this outsider's view, and I said, this is probably not what you want to hear, but I shared it with him, and I don't know if it helped him or not, but he's super successful now, so maybe that played a role in it. But reach out and don't look for somebody to give you the answers you want to hear. I think sometimes you want to look for people who are maybe going to tell you, the stuff you don't want to hear, and talk about, a little bit about the road less traveled and things like that. It's, I'm talking to my kids where they talk about where they want to live and what they want to do. And, it's easy to say, yeah, I want to live in Southern California, or I want to live in South Florida, or, but I think those people that are open to life, there's just more opportunity. There's just more opportunity.
So those two or three guys or girls that connected with you made you feel pretty good, I'm sure, that that you built a relationship with them.
Yeah, no, it does. And actually, when I was driving in here this morning, getting ready for our talk, one of the guys who was more of a local guy who we connected, we talk, we're friendly, but we talk a lot. And, he said, hey, I've got an idea I want to run past you. And, it's like, and certainly it's good for my ego, which ego is not necessarily a bad thing, but, and he said, I always appreciate that every time we talk, he's like, man, I always appreciate the time you give. And,
great.
I think it's, again, it goes back to just be willing to give. I mean, that stuff comes back to you in spades, and I don't do it to get back. And it's not like I'm trying to get back every week, but, over time, whenever I've got a problem, I know there are scores of people that I can call on to go, hey, just here's a situation. What would you do? Or what have you done in this place?
Right.
It's really great. So I certainly hope somebody might listen to this and give me a shout. If you need it, the cell number is 805-896-5961. Just send me a text.
Say it one more time.
805 or 805, as we'd say in Santa Barbara, 805-896-5961. That's the cell phone. Send me a text.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to get ahead, you can call Rob up.
I don't know if I'm going to get you ahead, but I'm going to give you some advice. Getting ahead's up to you.
Well, Rob, this was great. It was really nice talking to you. I think we helped out some people today. What I pulled out of this, it's hard work. It's step by step, hard work, education, step by step in your career. You have a good family. You've won awards. You've touched all the bases. And congratulations, you're a great role model to a lot of people, I'm sure, at the Royal Palm Yacht Club.
Well, I appreciate that, but don't forget, it's fun. Like, you got to have fun each day. If it's not fun, then you're you're also in the wrong line of business. But I think it's okay to feel a little bit tired at the end of each day. But I also like to sometimes, like last night, we had our employee holiday party, and I was spent.
Beautiful.
I'm on the microphone for 45 minutes. I got to be the hype man, but it's also one of my favorite nights of the year. I get home from my wife, I'm half exhausted. Half like I can't go to sleep now because I'm still on a high. So
right, especially if the staff had a good time. It's
they were. Yeah, I tapped out early. I think some were still having a good time somewhere around here.
Well, Rob, have a great day and good luck with your renovation projects. And we'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
I can't wait. Thanks, Leo.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye-bye.